Okay. And we are live. How's it going, Mets and overall baseball fans? Welcome back to the channel for the latest edition of the Queen's Corner podcast. This is your boy Wardy. That is former Met Anthony Recker. And we have a lot to get into because, Rack, it's been a minute. I mean, I don't think we've done a podcast at least two and a half weeks. I know that you've been out of town. I was out of town. We were all in Cali for different reasons. And Joe, who resides there, has been busy with his own work. So we're hoping to have Joe back after the conclusion of the Dodgers series. But quite a bit has happened since the last time that we talked. I know we got a lot of people chiming in live on YouTube right now. So shout out to everyone here. Shout out to everyone watching on the 7 Line socials, that being their Facebook or their Twitter. Make sure to drop your thoughts while watching the show live or on replay. And again, happy to have you all in here. But Rec, we got a lot has happened. A lot has happened over these past 2.5, 3 weeks. So how's everything been with you?
Pretty good. Nice little break. I kind of went on a little vacation out to California, see family. I wasn't down in the snobby area like you were in San Diego. I kind of wish I was, but what are you gonna do? It was fun. It was a good time. Always need it. Always got to get away sometimes. Kids had a blast. We had a blast. So just glad to be back, ready to get the second half going. Really, to be honest with you,
Yeah.
and I'm eating. So you know what else is new?
Hey, and great minds think alike. Right as I was getting home, my dinner was salmon. Rec was like, we got a little time. I'm going to make myself some salmon too. So, we're on the salmon train today, and that's good because salmon is very good. But
Healthy
too. Yeah, right. I also had some crab spring rolls, which were absolutely delicious. Really, really good. So it's been a good day for the eats, as it was when I was in San Diego. Best Mexican food I ever had. I still wish I was down there. I would be.
You haven't even had Mexican food if you're eating it in Pennsylvania because it's not Mexican
nothing.
food until you get somewhere else.
Literally nothing. Had an absolute blast. Really wish I was still there, but definitely motivated to be going back as soon as I possibly can. For anyone that's been to San Diego, you know that too. But let's get into it. Again, we not only have the first half as we break down the Mets going 42-48 over their first 90 games of the season, to kind of recap and review. If there's any player grades that we want to share, we're going to get into that. A brief discussion on the MLB draft and All-Star Game / Home Run Derby. We're not going to deep dive that too much because we really just want to emphasize this Mets second half as a whole. However, there were some key draft picks that we will highlight and just share initial thoughts on, along with an All-Star Game that did not feature Kodai Senga, even though it did at the same time. A little frustrating. Then we get into the second half, which is truly a do or die time for this ball club. And then we'll be wrapping things up with buy or sell as it's looming. Where does this team currently stand? Has it changed at all since the last time we talked? So, Rec, let's just hop into it, okay? Because last time we talked, everything was still doom and gloom in Mets land. They had yet to really begin that 6-game win streak. We saw them go on that 6-game heater. They swept the D-backs, and then they lost 2 out of 3 in San Diego, in which I went 1-1 in attendance out of those 3 games at Petco. So, for you, what is your thought process about this Mets team finally getting a run going? They fell short in San Diego. Is there any signs of semblance of life? Do you like it all what you're seeing, or do you really think that this is truly more same old, same old?
No, I mean, I liked what I saw there, in that series. Well, the last 2 series, I should say. I think this team has the ability to do what they show in small spurts. They didn't show it at all in June, obviously. Came out in July, won 6 straight, and looked like the team that I think we kind of expected, at least, or at least that we saw in April. So to me, it's just a matter of this team finding its consistency, finding that stride. We've talked about this before. It's not going to matter if they don't do it really, really soon, because at this point, with the way kind of the amount of games they have left, the way that the season's shaping out in the NL, there's not a whole lot left for them. They're running out of time, and they've dug themselves a big enough hole that they can't really waste any time at all. They've got to come out the second half on fire. And I say that because I know there's a good chance they probably, try to do some things. And we're going to talk about that a little bit later. But realistically, if they don't show something early, I wouldn't be buying no matter what. That's just, my opinion. Whether or not they do, who knows? Steve's a different cat. This organization is pretty different. But, he even said in his presser that this team needs to show him something in order for him to buy. He did not say they were automatically buyers. He said they were all in, but if they don't show him something, And so it'll be interesting to see what happens.
Yeah, and what defines as showing him something, right? Because this 6-game win streak happened after he had that discussion. The Mets went on to
Mhm.
lose 3 consecutive games after he had that presser, in which he, last minute did pretty much as they lost that series to the Brewers. Then they took 2 out of 3 against San Fran, swept the D-backs in a very impressive fashion, led not only by some great offense, but by their pitching. Kodai Senga going 8 strong, Carlos Carrasco going 8 strong, which caught everyone, including myself and your mother and your sister and your brother by surprise, to now dropping their latest series against a San Diego club that has been in a lot of ways the same as the Mets. They have been different in how they have struggled this year, but the lack of consistency has certainly been the same in that front. So it's really interesting comparing and contrasting those two clubs in particular. High payrolls and have yet to even live remotely close to the hype. So as we look at the first half in review, as the Mets currently sit 5 games below 500, they have no chance at getting the division this year. The only chance they have at playoffs is truly through the wild card. I think most could agree on that front. If you had to give out any player grades in particular, when we look at the rotation to key batters and Lindor, Alonso, McNeil, where would you put them?
Yeah, I mean, I'll start off with the position players right there. I mean, when I think about what I've seen so far this season let's start off with Lindor. Actually, no, I'm going to start off with Nimmo because at least you get a nice positive. Dude's been awesome. He signs his contract. He comes in. He's played unbelievable center field defense, and offensively, he's been everything he always is. In fact, maybe even showing a little bit more power than he has at times in his career.
Right.
So
he had a nice little stretch not too long ago.
Yeah, so I mean, I would look at Nimmo and say that his first half exceeded even my expectations, and which my expectations of him are pretty high because I know what the kid's capable of, and I trust that he's going to go out there and work hard and do everything he needs to do. Lindor, I've been very disappointed. I'm not going to lie. I think if I was going to give him a grade, it'd be around a D.
Really?
I don't know that he would disagree with that. Yeah. You can twist the numbers any way you want. Watching him, and I know over the last month he's been much better. But watching him, there have been balls that I felt he could get to that he hasn't.
Agreed.
Even particularly in the last couple of series. There was a couple balls where
that one Padres game, he was absolutely horrendous. No, I can't disagree there.
And so I expect him to be the rock. I expect him to be the one that goes out there and makes every play. So my expectations are up here, which is why I give him a D. I expect him to be an A. I expect him to be an A+. Offensively, look, he's hitting some homers. That's great. He's starting to, find the barrel a little bit more and strike out a little bit less. That's great. But it just hasn't been good enough for a team that really needs someone to get on base at a much higher level, particularly for someone who bats as high in the order as he does. Look, he does drive in runs, and I get that. Nimmo's on base all the time. McNeil, when he's been up there, Marte, I mean, he hasn't had like a ton of chances, but look, he drives in runs. That's great. They need more out of him. They need a guy to get on base more, and they need a guy who's going to be, I don't want to say better defensively because he still is very good. He still grades out very well, but I just see some plays that seem, and I'm not accusing him of a lack of an effort, but they seem like a lack of an effort because they're balls I feel like he should get to. So I don't know if it's a lost step thing. I don't know if it's a misreads, a couple of misreads kind of makes him look bad, whatever it is. It hasn't been the Lindor that I expected. When I move on to Pete, I guess I'd give him a C, if only because it's not his fault that he was injured. But realistically, he was injured for a little bit. The power's been there for the most part. He has not been the same Pete as far as, and I don't just want to look at average, but hitting the ball the other way.
It's been non-existent
taking his singles,
this year.
Getting that, like in those big moments, it seems like he can put the ball in play and he can hit a sac fly, but he doesn't necessarily shorten up and deliver that single the way he has in the past. Now, A lot of that's due to the fact that there's no shift and there's no big hole on the right side, and I get that. But I just like to see him make an adjustment sooner than later to capitalize a little bit more often and be the well-rounded hitter I've seen over the last 2 seasons and not the one that I'm seeing so far this year. Look, these grades may be a little harsh, but I have high expectations for these guys. I'm gonna skip to Francisco Alvarez because I think you guys know I'm not a big Starling Marte fan anyway. Jeff McNeil, I feel like he should be better, could be better, hasn't been great. That's what happens when you play as a contact guy in a game where suddenly there's no shift and there's not holes to hit it. It's gonna be difficult. You gotta start driving balls again. He's got to start putting balls in the gap. But I'm going to jump to Francisco Alvarez. I'm going to give him an A minus. I think for the most part, he has made every adjustment. The power is there. Defensively, he's looked very good. His throwing hasn't been great, and I would like to see him work on that a little bit. But outside of that, I mean, if I'm picking at him, I'm being really nitpicky because
as a former catcher, too, no less. Like because
yeah,
really
I mean, this kid's been at his age to come up and catch these guys and do what he's been doing. I truly feel like he's been awesome. And so to me, again, A minus, and I'm only taking away a few points just because he's not probably leading the Rookie of the Year candidacy. Like that's it. Like I mean, he's been awesome. He's been that good. He's right behind Corbin Carroll. Corbin Carroll's a good bit out, but he's been really, really good. Outside of that, I'm going to go straight to the pitching because in the lineup, I'm not too worried about many others. In the pitching side, obviously JV and Max, I think we could lump them into the same place, to be honest with you. I mean, Verlander was hurt for a little while. He's had some pretty bad outings. Max, he's had some good outings. So maybe he could survive with a B minus or a C plus type grade. I don't know. He's been okay at best. Certainly not the Max that we would like to see, especially in a consistency basis. JV, unfortunately, just hasn't been healthy for very long. And when he has been, it's been trying to find himself. And that's tough to do. So, I would say he probably would give himself a C minus, D plus. I don't know. That's where I'd put him. Kodai Senga, he's been awesome. Like he hasn't been quite the force I thought. He's had some inconsistency with the walks. That's been an issue. Outside of that, he's been the best starting pitcher on this team. So I don't know. I don't know what else to say. I'd give him probably a B plus.
I would give Kodai a B
just
plus
because
too.
if he could walk a few less, he'd be an A. Outside of that, I mean, where else do you go? Like these young starting pitchers, neither of them performed. McGill and Peterson. Carrasco's been inconsistent, although better of late. It's just been the bullpen. I mean, I'll just take them as a whole. David Robertson, you can move him aside. He's been quite good to good. But outside of that, the bullpen as a whole has not been good. This team gives up way too many home runs. They walk too many guys. They need if they're going to make a run, in my opinion, they need help. This team just doesn't have it right now. So that's. I mean, I'm harsh, but again, my expectations were higher for this team. So I don't see why you would give these guys a whole lot of love.
So I agree with being harsh because of, your heart's in the right place because you expected this team to kind of be guns a-blazing this season, and they've been anything but. The only true disagreement I think I have with you is on Lindor. I know that he has certainly been streaky this year. I know over his past 30-plus games, he's been batting over 300 with his 700 slug. So I feel like, not to be that guy to always be on Lindor's side because I've had fair criticisms of him when it's been warranted. However, since he's had his kid, and I don't know if that was a mental thing with him at all, or maybe he felt some added pressure knowing that was something that he was thinking about during the season. I can't speak for him. However, it is kind of interesting the type of run that he has been on from an offensive standpoint, at least since he had his second kid. Defensively, you're 100% right. While he's still in 90 percentile plus and outs above average this year, he has had some really, really head scratching plays where it's like, I know we're spoiled with his defense, but just some simple plays where you're like, okay, how do you miss that? The same way that Manny Machado every now and then can get caught, and you're like, how does that happen, Manny? Like, you are literally unbelievable defensively. So these guys are human. I get it. I think I would put Lindor more in a B minus C plus category, mainly because when you look at not only the production from the rest of the lineup this year, but shortstop production as a whole from the NL. a lot of guys have been down for the most part this year. And this is not to say, hey, oh, because everyone's been down, he's a lesser of the evils, if you will. However, there is still something to be said about his power production, how well he's been able to hit in the gaps this season, and is still on pace for like 120 RBIs this year with an offense which hasn't been anything spectacular this season. They're right around middle of the pack if you look through the numbers right now. So
who's on pace for 120 RBIs?
Lindor right now, or under, I should say, because we're 90 games in, but he's still on pace for over 100 right now, which is, again, very much what we saw last year. But to your point, the contact I would like to see more of. The batting average doesn't really mean a lot to me because I know that batting average means only so much in today's game. However, when you look at Alonso, you look at McNeil, I mean, the reigning batting champ, and we're kind of getting a shell of what he usually is. My biggest concern on that offensive end, and I don't know if I highlighted this with you last podcast episode, but it's their lack of ability to hit now with a no shift. It feels like because these players do not have incentive to say go Oppo because there's a gap on the third base side, or for Alonso more in between first and second, that they're just like, okay, I'm going to go back to being pull happy as I've been in my career. And it's leading to a lot more ground outs, a lot more lack of success, especially in Jeff's front. Alonso doesn't know how to hit for Oppo whatsoever right now. And these were guys that, again, thrived so well last season. I mean, Pete was like a 260 hitter going Oppo, driving, or even if they were bloops, but driving in runs with 2 outs with a runner on third. Like, those things were huge, and they have just severely lacked that this year since Alonso's come back from the injury from Charlie Moore and Heater. He has not been the same just yet. Jeff, who started off really great through the first month and a half of the season, has been anything but since then, which is unfortunate because, again, love Jeff, really appreciate him. But the fact of the matter is he will be the first to tell you that he's not performing well, and he really needs to get out of this mindset of pulling the ball as much as he is, assuming it's going to have success, because what we've seen so far is that it's not. He's not able to. He hasn't been able to pull it consistently past the shift there, the normal shift, I should say, that they just have for their defensive placements. And then when you get onto the pitching, Scherzer and Verlander, I would both probably rate around a C minus. The expectations, the dollars that you invest in them, and they have a lot of similarities in the sense of Max has had more consistency this year when he's been on. When the slider's been on, he has been great, but that has been a Jekyll and Hyde thing, like what we saw against Manny Machado not once but twice in that Padres lineup. This head of the rotation is just way too vulnerable to getting absolutely torn apart with a home run ball. I mean, they're just throwing too many meatballs down the plate, and you cannot do that in today's game. You cannot do that to these hitters. And for how much money you're paying, I mean, they're just not living up to it. Kodai Senga, I would give an A minus to B plus. I mean, he's been able to get his command better as of late, too. He just had another dominant 12K performance. He's already had 2 of those this year. When he's on, he's, in my opinion, one of the best starters in all the NL. So I've really been happy with him. But that's about it for grades. Everyone watching live or in the comments on replay, let us know what your player grades are for the first half with all these guys. But now let's get into briefly talking about the draft and the All-Star. Last year, I had a chance to emphasize the draft a bit more. I was busy out of town in San Diego when I was happy. I know you were busy as well, Joe. So with us wanting to emphasize the second half, I will be brief with the draft. A couple things I do want to note, however, is I'm happy with the Mets picks. From everything that I've seen, they, again, had another strong draft. They did go pitcher and shortstop heavy. And for everyone that says, how could the Mets draft a shortstop with their first pick? You take the best available player. It's as simple as that. You worry about positions once you get there. Mark Vientos was a shortstop at one point in his career. So just to give you an example as to why you don't need to be worrying about something as simple as that. Their first pick, however, was Colin Houck, shortstop out of Parkview High School, which was deemed by many to go much higher in the draft. So this was deemed by many as a steal, which I'm happy about. That first pick the Mets had, getting a lot of plus stuff, especially with his bat-to-ball ability. They then drafted for a second consecutive year, starting pitcher from Florida, and Brandon Sprout. And Sprout, or Sprout, however you pronounce his name, was drafted by the Mets last year, decided to go back for his senior year at Florida, and agreed to be drafted by the Mets again. So that's always good. It's nice to see a guy, too, opt to go back in the draft and be willing to accept from the club that drafted him a year prior. Normally, that's not how it works. If a guy enters back, a lot of times they may want to avoid said club or just want to go back for different reasons. So that was a pretty interesting story. Again, he definitely adds a nice spunk, and he might have pure stuff wise, he might be up there with Blade Tidwell already in this prospect pool of Mets starting pitchers that they have. Then you have the Dominic Hamels, you have Mike Vasile, the list goes on and on. Mets are really starting to build this farm pitching wise, which is important. They need it. Calvin Ziegler, too, who's a little bit lower on the totem pole. And then, of course, a really interesting name, Nolan McLean, or McLean, however you pronounce his last name, a two-way player out of Oklahoma State. This is something that we're going to see more of in the years to come, and I really think it goes in hand with Shohei Ohtani, Rec. Just the inspiration that I feel like he's bringing to the game of baseball, to being able to do what he does. Of course, now whether Nolan transitions into being a full-time two-way player has yet to be seen. That's a kind of a stretch to say at this point in his young career. However, had a fantastic offensive season playing Oklahoma State, looked really, really sharp on the mound. So any remarks you'd like to share on his front? Because it's really interesting to see the Mets take a pick like this, and honestly, just gets me excited for the potential alone.
Yeah, I love the idea that potentially baseball is going to. It's not going to move to this. This isn't going to be a norm. Like, this is not going to happen. We're not going to see another Shohei Ohtani in our lifetime. Not to the level that he's at. The idea that teams are willing to even give these guys the option. Let them see what happens. That's at least encouraging. I mean, I can remember a time when it was like, what are you doing? Because you're not doing both. So figure it out. Pick one. Oh, you didn't do that well? Oh, you could try this later, but you're not doing them at the same time. I mean, Sean Doolittle came up as a great prospect, first base / outfielder, hitting home runs,
really?
had bad knees.
I did not know.
Converted him to a pitcher. Oh, yeah. Converted him to a pitcher. All of a sudden, he's, a heck of a reliever, multiple time All-Star. So I think there's a chance for that kind of stuff to happen. And when you take a kid like this, it just gives you two avenues to take him down, in his development. So it's just smart baseball, or, smart business, I think, in my opinion. As far as the draft picks go overall, though, I mean, to me, they can have all the hype in the world. They can have all the stuff in the world. It's not going to matter until they get into the professional ranks and they show that they're willing and able to put in the work and do what they need to, to make the most of that, because that takes a lot and not everybody can do that. I saw first round picks, top prospects not make it out of A ball, double A ball. Like,
right.
It's not a guaranteed thing. So it'll be interesting to see, how it plays out over the next couple of years. I try not to dive too much into the baseball draft. It's a tough one. It's tough.
It is a tough one. And that's why I admire, my good buddy at Joe DeMeo at SNY, because this is, is very much his thing. I know we got the prospect gurus out there. It's always fun to tap into those minds, especially this time of year, because that's what they do best. And for us, as fans who, of course, deep dive at times, but more than anything, just excited to see what they bring to the organization and you bring to the prospect pool, the depth. How does it grade now, right, for this Mets team? How are they going to be looking ranking wise or this next year with a plethora of pitchers that they acquired? But to steer away from pitching, one more player I do want to mention, that is shortstop AJ Ewing, who was drafted with the 134th pick by the Mets this year. He comes out of Springboro High School. Absolutely love his bat to ball skills. Really quick bat, powerful bat too. And he signed with the Mets already instead of opting to go for college. So that was something that we didn't know for certain if that was going to happen. It did. So that's another key piece, and hopefully a guy that will have a promising future in the Mets organization. So overall, very happy with the Mets draft. I got to say, for as long as I've been a fan, there have been very few drafts where I feel like the Mets have, say, made the wrong selections. I feel like they have done a very good job with their internal drafts for a good amount of years now. I mean, it still crushes me because he's not with the Mets, but I always think about Jared Kelenic, for example, and how much I love that pick and the picks ensuing from there, the Brett Beatties of the world, and, so on and so forth. And, of course, the success that they've had with international scouting and the Mauricios, the Alvarezes, and all those guys. So very happy with what they've been doing on that front, and now it's just important for them to not only properly develop, but see if they're going to have a future role in the organization or if they're going to be a trade ship down the line. But let's hop into, and of course, make sure to smash that like and subscribe if you're watching live on our replay for the latest edition of the Queen's Corner podcast. Myself and Anthony Recker here, and appreciate everyone watching live. I did see a donation I would like to address briefly from Yoshima. Shout out all the members watching the live show. That Yoshima with a $5 holla earlier said, if the Mets win consistently now, then salmon will have to be on the menu more. You're right. If the Mets go on a heater right out of the starting this Dodgers series, and I will gladly have more salmon. And I think
like
that's,
that.
I think that's a win-win too. You really can't go wrong if you're in our shoes, right?
Well, and we had the whole, like, when Cohen was taking guys out to dinner, like, what was it? One of them was like lasagna or ravioli. Was that
Right.
Diaz?
Yes,
And
correct.
Lindor was, I'm not remembering them, but I remember that was a topic. So yeah, I mean, I kind of like that. I like that. Salmon will be the thing. That's what we'll go with, especially All-Star game in Seattle, catching some salmon up there, throwing them, grilling them up, and getting ready for the second half. Boom, let's go.
There we go. I love to hear that. Yeah, let's keep that rolling. So now getting into keeping things rolling, it's do or die time in Metsland, Rec. And as we look at the second half schedule, I mean, we saw it heading into the season. We knew it was tough. It's almost like, maybe the Mets should have took advantage of basically a month of baseball against not great teams. Crazy, I know. And here we sit 5 games below 500, 7 games out of the wild card spot, and it only gets more difficult from here, Rex. So
Yep.
let's talk about this second half as a whole. Obviously, they have the Dodgers matchup coming up. For those that didn't watch, make sure to do just that. I did a complete deep dive of that series preview with the best Dodgers creator out there, that being in DMAC from Dodgers Nation. Make sure to check it out. It's already up on the channel, and it'll be up on his channel in the next coming hours. So make sure to check it out, guys. Greatly appreciate. But not only with the Dodgers matchup, but with their ensuing schedule coming up for the remainder of July. Then you get into August. And they play the Phillies a billion times in the final couple weeks of the season. How are you feeling about this team and how they're matching up right
now? I think the opening of their second half schedule isn't as daunting as it might look. The Dodgers, obviously, I think started playing a little bit better down the stretch there in the second half. Plus, Arizona started playing a little bit worse. I think that had played more into the fact that the Dodgers are now in first place. The White Sox are a great matchup for anybody. They're terrible. I don't know what's their deal is. They have all the talent in the world the last couple of years, and they can't do anything with it. Boston pitching, not great. Offensively, this team rakes. They hit homers. They do everything.
Yoshida
That's going to be a tough
Turner
matchup.
But cook us. I already know.
I mean, yeah, it's going to be interesting.
Yeah.
Then they get a couple with the Yankees. The Yankees, I don't know where it'll line up with Cole and Rodon and everything else, but they don't scare me. I mean, that team obviously has been struggling a little bit lately. Sean Casey, I think their new hitting coach, could help out. Love the guy. Got to work with him at MLB Network. That'll be interesting to see where they go. And then they go with Washington the rest of the way through July. So I think their July schedule isn't bad. Then it gets into August. And that's when I think this team is, I don't want to say going to struggle, but it's going to be interesting. Like that August schedule, they get Kansas City to start, so great. Pittsburgh's in there, so that's a good matchup. Pittsburgh has not been playing the same baseball. St. Louis for a few. That one's going to be they should be able to run through that. So they have, and then they get the Cubs, but the Cubs I think are playing a little bit better of late. They don't scare me by any means, but they're not a terrible team. But they've got some big ones.
Deadline too. That's another key question with the Cubs.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see how these teams look after the trade deadline. The thing to me with August is they also have the Braves. They have twice, and they have Texas, and they have Baltimore. So those are obviously 1, 2, 3 teams leading their division, 4 series total. It's gonna be. I'm sorry, Baltimore's not leading their division, but they're right up there with the.
They're
with the
a
Rays.
wagon though. They're so much fun.
They're playing great. So I think that's going to be interesting to see where they're at by the end of August. And then September's tough. They only have, I think, 2 series against losing teams with losing records, and they're Seattle and Washington right off the get. That's it. Oh, I'm sorry. Seattle doesn't have a losing record. Washington and Minnesota, and they're right in the middle there. Otherwise, it's Philly, Miami, Philly they've played well against, but they got to keep doing it, and Philly's going to get hot in the second half. They've been playing much better baseball. I think they're going to be a really good team in the second half. Sadly. Miami's been awesome. As much as the Mets can beat them, it still scares me. Cincinnati, if they can continue any momentum, wow, they're dangerous. Arizona, we've seen them fall off. I'm not sure they're going to be quite as good in the second half. So I could see them doing well in that series. Minnesota is that team that they're going to pitch well, or can they hit enough? We'll see. But realistically, that's an interesting. That's like a similar matchup. I think
you already know Correa's going to hit at least 2 bombs that series.
Probably. They get Seattle and Washington. I mean, I love Seattle, so I'm not gonna say that the Mets should roll through them, even though they haven't been playing great. They have a really, really stacked roster. It's just a really tough second half for this Mets team, and it's really going to be, can they find consistency? And they have to win a lot of the games they're supposed to win. Right. I mean, I'm talking 80% of those games against Washington, Pittsburgh, St. Louis, like they got to take 4 out of every 5 if they want any shot at this, because they're so far back in the standings right now. There's 3 teams hovering at 49 and 48 wins respectively. Who is it? It's Philly at 48, San Francisco, and Milwaukee at 49. Those teams, if they go 500 the rest of the way, or roughly around, it's roughly 85 wins. They're an 85 win team if they go 500 the rest of the way. Now, San Francisco, I could see being worse than that. Philly, I see being better than that. Milwaukee, I think they're a 500 or better team, so I see them doing it. So you've got those 3 teams. That's 6, 7, and 8 in the standings right now in the wild card. So the Mets have to climb at least above all 3 of those teams. Yes, could Arizona come down to them? Could Miami come down to them? Yes, but again, the Mets have a lot of work to do to get there.
So much work.
I mean, they are way behind the 8 ball when it comes to Arizona and Miami. So it's really going to take a lot from the Mets to get to that point. You're looking at, potentially about 70 games or so in the second half. They're gonna have to put up 45 and 25 minimum to get to the playoffs.
Isn't that crazy how comical that sounds given the state?
That's tough to do. To expect that is really hard. I mean, the Rays started out the year like 50 and 20 or something like that, and everyone was like, "Oh my God, greatest team ever!" Like you're only 5 games off that pace. Like that's what the Mets have to do, and so it's gonna be interesting. I don't think that this team, as it's constructed right now, has what it takes to do that with all those other teams in front of them. Because you got to remember, I mean, no, San Diego's been awful. They have basically the same record as the Mets, but they should be better. Like they've shown more signs to me than the Mets have in that first half, and so it's going to be like, what gives? What can this team really go on that run? I'm not sure, but that's what it's going to take. It's going to take a magical run.
And an amazing run, if you will, is what
it can happen. It can happen. Of
course,
I'm not putting this team in the gutter yet, in the sewer. Like they're not dead.
You've been around some magical runs before, so
15 was fun.
Yes, 15 was fun. It would be nice,
but we weren't at this point. We didn't let it get this bad.
And that's the issue. It's like when I've compared and contrasted the 2019 Nationals, the 2021 Braves, the 2022 Phillies. None of them were really even this down the down. The Nats in the first half,
this late in the season.
Not this late in the season. Exactly. The Nats,
maybe in May, but not this late.
Yeah, the Nats had a point last in 2019 where I think they were close to 10 games below, but it was earlier in the year, and then they got on an absolute heater and they didn't look back. It's concerning. Look, I mean, we would be silly to be anything more than blindly hopeful. I'm very cautiously optimistic right now, and I think what makes things even more interesting with this all, and again, appreciate the donation from a Braves fan. I will never become a Braves fan, but I appreciate the donation no less. Thank you so much for that. Let's get into topic 4 here, which is the buy or sell looming. I know that you touched on it briefly, Rec, but we don't have a lot of time now, right? The trade deadline's the first week of August. It's that week of the Kansas City series, if I'm not mistaken. That or Baltimore. I know it's the first couple days in August when the deadline actually happens. So the Mets basically have to evaluate the entire year as a whole in just the next week and a half, 2 weeks, 2.5 weeks. Like it's do or die, not only for their season, but it's do or die with this decision making. And funny enough, from everyone's favorite reporter, Buster Olney came out and said today that the Mets are expected not to sell. I would go on to say that I probably have better sources than him, but I'll leave it at that. However, I do want to know, Rec, where these things currently stand with the Mets and with the Tommy Phams balling out, with the David Robertsons looking great. These guys as rental contracts. Would it be foolish for the Mets if, say, they're, let's say hypothetically, 3 games out, 3 games below 500 around the trade deadline? Do you think that would be absolutely foolish for them to hold on to these rentals?
Yes.
Okay.
100%.
Yeah.
I'm hopeful, but I'm also a realist. As someone who's not in that clubhouse, I can look at this team and say that I don't see it happening. I mean, it can happen, and I'm not going to I would never go in that clubhouse and say, you guys can't do this, because that's ridiculous. And I'm not saying they can't do it. I don't see it happening. So until they show me otherwise, until they come out in the second half and win the first 6 games, I can't feel like they really have that legitimate shot. So why would you not? You don't have to rip apart the whole core. Would I mind if someone was like, "Hey, we'll take Starling Marte off your hands and his contract for the next 2 years"? It's not going to happen, but I would love that.
Who wouldn't love
Um,
that? Oh my god. Ugh.
we won't even get into
I
that
know,
one.
I know.
Would I care if someone took McNeil off our hands and gave us something back for him? I mean, it's not going to happen. He just signed a deal. He's going to be here for a while. I
Especially at
wouldn't
his
be. I wouldn't be bothered by it.
here.
Um,
Well, not to cut you off, I did just want to briefly say on Jeff. I think it would be a really foolish thing for the Mets to do right now, and I'm about to say that as someone who really likes him. His value's so low,
his value's low, and that's I
and
get
I
it.
do think
I get it.
I do think it'll get better. It's giving me like
And the
2021
problem is the
vibes, but
Mets have
worse.
already shown a willingness to pay the full cost of these contracts when they send guys away.
Sure.
So I think they already are kind of behind the 8 ball on as far as the bargaining chip goes. It's just really about, can they get prospects for these guys? If someone's willing to give up a decent prospect for Tommy Pham,
Hammer.
have fun, man. Go get it. I love, like, what you're doing has been really surprising and awesome.
Yeah.
Go get it somewhere
Seriously.
else and give us a prospect. Thank you very much. If that's a possibility, yeah, I would sell a few guys. I don't think the Mets should try that walk the line thing, try to get cute, see if they, give up a couple guys, but maybe get a couple guys like, for the big league team and just see if they can find a way to make it.
No, they're just
don't do
doing
that.
swaps.
You either sell
No.
or you buy. And that's to me, standing still at the deadline makes zero sense for any team across baseball. It makes no sense at all. Why? Like, why not do something? I mean, even if you're the A's, you've got a couple guys that someone might buy. Even if you're the Royals, where it doesn't look like there's even any hope coming, like there's nothing coming. What's going to happen? This team's not going to be good next year. Still, like, you might have a couple of contracts, a couple of guys you can pawn off. Go for it. Just get something in return. To me, it only makes sense.
Yeah, no, I agree with you, and it's a really tricky situation where this team is currently at, because you can tell that, it truly would be a gutting feeling should the Mets say, hey, like, this is just how it is. But at the same time, this team also kind of needs that wake up call, and I would even go a step further to say that if there is a market where the Mets eat half his salary, if there's at all any interest, and the Mets don't have an amazing run, you got to trade Max. I mean, if there's any value there, and you say you eat 20 of his 40 million this year, maybe you eat 20. Should he opt in next year? I mean, Steve Cohen has eaten over.
Well,
20.
you've already eaten 25 million of his contract this year, so you'd be eating
Correct.
another.
Yeah. I mean, no, you're literally right. And you look at Robinson Cano. I mean, the fact that Steve was so willing to do that, eat the majority of McCann's contract to a lesser degree, like, these things go on. I mean, they literally are eating $5 million just to have a very mid reliever in Gott. If there's one thing that the Mets can control better than most other clubs, is that they're just willing to eat money if it means it'll help this team down in the future. And should they find themselves in any situation where someone wants a Max, and I don't see JV happening given JV's contract length still, but Max, if he can get in a groove, but the Mets continue to struggle, if there's any value there, it would be unbelievably foolish for them not to take it up and try to see where that takes them.
100%. The only problem is there's only probably 3 starts before 3. Where are we at? July 4th. Yeah, there's only 3 starts before the trade deadline.
It's time for Max.
It's tough. Maybe a fourth in there, but
yeah.
It's got to happen. It's got to happen fast. And yeah, I mean, I don't know. I mean, the Dodgers might be buyers for a starting pitcher. They've been struggling with injuries and everything else.
They have struggled with their pitching.
Texas is going to go for an ace somewhere. I mean, where's it going to come from? I don't know. There's a few places that you think teams are going to be buying, and they'd be willing to go for an ace. The problem with Max, like you said, is that option for next year. He's going to take it. It's $43.5 million. The Mets are going to have to pay all that probably to get any prospect. That's crazy to me. It's just crazy.
It's absolutely absurd. But again, going back to how we talked over the past year or two, this is the risk they took. It's blowing up in their face to a degree, but this is the risk they took. And it wouldn't hurt as much if they just had the home run rate down and say, maybe they were a little bit more inconsistent. But, it's not only, and, you look at JV's 3.6 ERA, you look at Max's 4+. It's how they're giving up these runs, which gives you just so little confidence when it comes to being a big game pitcher. Like, why should I
Mm-hmm.
have any confidence in Max in a big game right now? Like, let's be serious, let alone holding a
The home
lead.
run ball is just killing him, man. I mean, I know it always has been a
Unbelievable.
problem, but it's killing him this year.
It's killing this team is what it's doing, and JV
Yep.
to a little bit of a lesser extent. And then you got the bullpen, which we've already spoken on that behalf. Cherry, thank you so much for the $6 holla. I appreciate that. That means a lot. But I really think that's all she wrote for the show, Rec. Is there any final remarks you got before we wrap things up about this Mets team? Like, if there's one thing you're looking for aside from the broad term of consistency for this team as a whole, if there's one thing that you're really hoping you see.
See, I don't know if that's you or me, but I'm getting like kickback on your audio right now.
Okay, maybe that's you.
Going in and out. Maybe it's just me though.
Okay, are you good now? You good?
Anybody else getting that? Oh, see, you just went in and out. Can't hear you. Here, let's see. I'll try putting this one in. See if it helps.
Good.
Anyway, continue on.
Any final remarks before we wrap things up?
Oh man. I don't know. I think I've been probably the most positive one on this podcast at times.
Isn't that crazy?
A couple of weeks ago, it was, I was saying it's not over yet. They need to go on a run, but they need to do it now. Could they do it? It could happen. I'm really struggling to see it right now, even though they won 6 of their last 8. Looking at the schedule, looking at everything going on, they really have to come out and do it right from the get-go. If this team doesn't come out at least 7 to 10, if not 8 to 10, I really don't see it happening. I know some of these NL teams look like a mirage. The Marlins, the Giants, the Diamondbacks to some people, but they're not. These teams aren't bad. Are the Reds going to continue doing what they're doing? I don't know, but they have youth and they have excitement around their organizations right now. And to me, that means so much. And that can really help a clubhouse. So this Mets team has to fight against that. And they're going to have to do a really good job in the second half to put themselves in position. Otherwise, like I said, if they don't come out hot, I'm selling some guys and really just seeing what I can get. And it's unfortunate. You don't want to give up on a season, but at this point, there really is no other way to go. So it's do or die.
It's do or die. It's do or die.
That's what we called it. It's do or die. I was trying to think of a better term, but it was right there in front of me, and I couldn't. It's
do or die.
Do or die.
And just like the die part, this show is now going to die as we're wrapping things up. So thank you guys so much for watching for the latest edition of the Queen's Corner podcast. That's Anthony Recker. You can check him out weekly on MLB Network. And, of course, make sure to check him out on his socials.
Tomorrow night, MLB Tonight.
There you go. Make sure you're watching the boy. And same here. You guys know where to find me on YouTube, Twitter. Same stuff applies. Thank you guys so much. And I will see you all tomorrow night after the conclusion of Game 1 between the Dodgers.
I'm going to finish my dinner.
There you go.